I assume you're not a big Trump guy.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, but it's so wild watching these trials. I'm somebody who I voted Democrat, I voted third party, and I did vote for Trump in 2016 because I just couldn't vote for Hillary, and I was still living in this it's got to be two party. I wanted to ask you, it's probably the most well educated on the topic of possible third party. Do you think how do you think we get people to think about, let's say you and I both, we have different third parties we want. I think we both agree that any, third party option is good or it's better. How do we, are we ever going to get out of this two party system? Because can people delay gratification enough to keep voting for third parties? What do you think the long term of that is?
Well, I think Bobby Kennedy had a real chance to do something because he appealed to he's a natural lefty, came up as a Democrat, and he his a lot of his rhetoric and policies and work actually appeals to people who consider themselves conservatives.
Mhm.
And he was the only one out there telling the truth about COVID, and
He had a lot of independent support.
had a lot of independent support. And then he was a peace candidate. And then he wrecks it because he's a off the chart Zionist. And right now, if World War III, it looks like if it's going to start, it's going to start over there. And he's just repeating propaganda, pro-war propaganda that comes right out of Bibi Netanyahu's mouth. And Bibi Netanyahu's not even popular in Israel, so that's the weird
That's what I
thing.
gather. Yeah.
That's the weird thing to see, American politicians bend the knee to Bibi Netanyahu, and he's been being protested for over a year in his own country, right? 40 weeks straight before October 7th, they were protesting Benjamin Netanyahu. And, Benjamin Netanyahu, in his own words, described himself as a terrorist because he says that you can tell a terrorist because they're systematically targeting innocent people. That's exactly what's happening right now in Gaza. And that doesn't make me a Hamas supporter. You know who is a Hamas supporter? Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, because they funded them. They basically created them. And why would they create that? Why would they want that, right? Just like, why would the United States government want 9/11 to happen? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because they had this Patriot Act on the shelf. Maybe because they had the project for the new American century where they wanted to go invade 7 different Muslim countries, and they did it.
Didn't a bond like $100 billion disappear too right around then? There was some huge amount of trillion. Yeah. Whatever happened to that?
So 9/10, Donald Rumsfeld gave a press conference where he said the Pentagon can't account for $1 trillion. So, and that plane
$1 trillion.
Yeah. So, but we know from General Wesley Clark that they had a plan drawn up before 9/11 to go into all those Muslim countries, Libya, Iraq, Iran,
Afghanistan,
Syria, and do what? Overthrow them and steal their natural resources. And that's exactly what they did. So that's what and so the last one on the list is Iran. And so that's what it looks like they're trying to do now. And it looks so anyway. That I think, getting back to your third party question, I think Bobby Kennedy had a real chance to do something. Unfortunately, he threw it all away by his Zionist policy, which contradicts everything else he's saying. That's the bad thing about him.
Yeah, you'll lose the progressives and the people that are on the far right too with that. And you'll lose people who are more like me, who float around in the middle, that are just like, I get that it's there was the Bill Burr dust up a few days ago. I don't know if you saw the clip where Bill Burr's like, I'm for the kids, and Bill Maher's like, well, yeah, that's easy to say. Well, for me, it's like, I'm for not having wars. I know that's easy to say, but I'm more likely to vote for somebody who says, hey, I'm not going to get involved in anything. That was one of the big reasons I voted Republican for the first time in 2016. I was like, and then he fired a bunch of missiles into Syria anyway. But anyway, the anti-war thing, can a guy get that back from a candidate, please? Can we not have 7 foreign wars?
You mentioned it before. I always considered myself a liberal because I was for freedom of speech, anti-censorship. I was for bodily autonomy, meaning my body, my choice. I was anti-war, right? And so all those 3 things are
I still am.
I'm still for those things, but now if you were for those things, they call you a right winger.
Yeah.
But that's just because the Democrats have became authoritarians. They're not for my body, my choice, because they were for mandated experimental vaccines during COVID. And so, so now, if you listen to Democrats on television, they say they're pro-abortion, which nobody's
I
pro-abortion.
know, I know.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what you call something that's horrible, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you see that movie? It was an abortion. Nobody's pro-abortion. You're pro keeping the government out from in between my doctor and myself. We're supposed. That's what I'm pro. I'm pro-choice. All right.
Yeah.
Nobody's. And then also I'm anti-war. They're not anti-war. They're pro-war, which is what Russiagate was there to get people primed for, a war against Russia and Ukraine. They've been planning this for a while. So it's the same thing that's happening with Israel and Gaza is the same thing that happened with Ukraine. People who are pro those wars, they start the story from the third act. They skip the first two acts. Like in Ukraine, they skip that the United States overthrew the democratically elected government in Ukraine. The CIA got in bed with the Nazis,
Literally. Yeah. Yeah.
in Ukraine, and did that coup. And then the Russian-speaking ethnic people in the eastern part of Ukraine, called the Donbass, didn't want to go along with that coup government. And so the coup government started shelling those people and literally bombing them. And they had two peace accords called the Minsk Accords. And who broke those peace accords? It wasn't the people in the Donbass. It was the Ukrainian government that kept shelling them in a way to provoke Russia, Putin, to come in and invade so that we could have this war, because the NATO and the West wanted to have this war because they thought it would bleed Russia and it would hurt them militarily. And then we could blow up their Nord Stream pipeline so we could sell liquefied natural gas.
I thought that was a shark that did that, Jimmy.
So you can't, so that's called a conspiracy theory, but it's also a conspiracy fact. That's exactly what happened, and that's what is happening. And by the way, the neocon morons who did Iraq, who did Afghanistan for 20 years, who did Libya and turned it into a failed state with open slave markets, who did Syria, are the same morons who did this Ukraine thing. And it's strengthening Russia, because the big thing that the West never wanted was to have Russia and China come closer together. And that's, of course, is what is happening right now because of this. And because people like Joe Biden's administration is weaponizing the dollar all over the place, sanctioning people. And the only reason that works is because the United States dollar is the reserve currency of the world. But people are starting to go off that. Now there's BRICS and people, so there's power centers. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and other countries are joining on to form economic alliances so they don't have to use their reserve currency. Right now, people don't know that our country's whole economy is propped up by the petrodollar, and which means that if anybody in the world wants to buy oil, they have to first convert their currency into American dollars. And so they have to hold American dollars in reserve, which artificially props up the value of the American dollar. Well, because of what we're doing with Ukraine and Russia right now, Saudi Arabia started selling oil in other denominations besides the US dollar. So that marks the beginning of the end for the United States economy and our dollar. And people don't care. I mean, the people who are doing this policy don't care. It's the oligarchy. So getting back to my whole point is that we don't live in a democracy. We literally live in an oligarchy. And people like Bill Gates are our real rulers, because he runs the WHO, and the WHO gets to dictate what I get to say on YouTube, and they get to dictate now pandemic policy, which takes away your rights.
Yeah.
And it really is a handful of people. Why do you think Jeff Bezos, the second richest guy in the world, bought the Washington Post? Do you think he did that because he wants people out there telling the truth about people in his class? No, he did that so he can control the narrative, and so he can keep even greater control of what's happening in our economy. And he's not only buying media in the United States. I was just in Norway. He's a big owner of media in Norway, and people hate Jeff Bezos for that same reason over there. So this is a fight. This isn't a left-right fight anymore. This is a fight between, and that's why they want to push transism. They want to push identity politics. They want to make you identify with your gender and your race and talk about white supremacy, because it keeps us divided. And when we come together, like the people like Christian Smalls brought white people and black people and workers of all stripes together to oppose Amazon and form a union on Staten Island, that's the thing that scares them. And so we got to push back against that. Again, it's not a left or right fight anymore. This is us against them. It's the 99% against the 1%, and people need to wake up. And what's the sad thing to me is that, like, during the truckers' protests in Canada, all the Democrats, people who consider themselves liberal, were cheering on the suppression of their peaceful
They're
protest.
calling them terrorists.
They're calling
Like,
them terrorists, exactly.
yeah.
And I was like, that's what free speech is about. If you can't stand up for, even, you don't have to like the truckers or even agree with them, but to see the authoritarian measures that they took to shut them up, which was they turned off their bank accounts, they instituted the Emergency Powers Act, which a court in Canada, the Supreme Court ruled that was against the law. They shouldn't have been able to do that, and they said those people were criminals and Nazis and white supremacists, and the people who vote Democrat in the United States cheered that on. Well, now those same people are protesting on college campuses against the war, and now the right wing's cheering on them, having their heads cracked open and their freedom of speech taken away. So what the establishment has is the left and the right cheering on the censorship of each other, and so that's what people need to wake up to. That freedom of speech is about you have to tolerate the speech that you hate.
That's what matters,
because it's going to come back to you. And that's, I mean, if nothing proves it, it's the truckers, it's January 6th, and now it's the same people who cheered on the prosecution of those people are getting it stuck right back in their faces.